Many of us here know your work, have admired you from a distance, have been inspired by you, uplifted by you. And so it's a great honor to all be looking up in the direction of the sky, and there you are floating in from somewhere in India, and we'd love to know where you are and hear from you.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself and my work and my life, and then we'll open up to questions. So I am in a place called Dehradun in the foothills of the Himalaya. This is where I was born. This is where I returned when I gave up an academic career. And my wonderful late mother said, don't hesitate, take the cowshed. So I started the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology in my mother's cowshed. And that's where I'm sitting. Yeah, this is where I sculpted the Einstein that's behind me, because he was my inspiration for doing physics. And I've grown up with cows. I've grown up with the forest. My father was a forest conservator. And it's a forest that have been my teachers. And I became an activist when I saw the forest disappear. Now, I have a very deep connection with Sabah and Sarawak, because in the 70s, I joined the beautiful movement called Chipko Tuhag. And women of my region in the mountains came out and said, you think these trees are timber mines and you can just keep extracting them? But they are the trees that hold the water, they hold the soil, they give us fresh air. And we're going to hug the trees, we won't let you cut them. And for a decade, women would do actions in the forests. They'd all collect from around, and then they take turns. And I'm giving these details because this is the kind of experiment you are working on. There was no money. Each of them would give a fistful of rice. And that fistful of rice would take care of the 100, 200, 300 women who were camping in the forest to protect the forest. So it was a zero money movement for a whole decade they acted. And then we got a logging ban because the floods became so intense that the government realized the women were right. The real function of the forest was to hold the soil and water, not to provide timber. And around that same time, I later in the 80s, I got very involved with movements in Malaysia, CAP, SAM. And there were actions on the tropical rainforests in Sarawak. And I would come often, the work on the Himalaya and the protecting the forests of the Himalaya, the work in your part of the world. And around that time, the World Bank announced a tropical rainforest project, $8 billion. I read it and I said, this is a recipe for destroying the forests and planting commercial plantations, the story of palm oil. And I did a critique sitting with colleagues in Malaysia, in Penang, and it became a book that led to the creation of a world rainforest movement, which is still active, but we stopped that tropical rainforest, forest funding of the World Bank. I'm basically trained as a physicist, and in quantum theory, which was my PhD, was hidden variables and non-locality in quantum theory. Cynthia, when you say ideas of deep ecology, ideas of ecofeminism, these are in the social sphere. But at the knowledge level, we've had to make a huge break. A century ago, and yet the world is sleeping. A century ago, physicists realized that the idea that the world is made of solid particles, all separate, and the only way they can make contact is by contact. The only way they can move is if I take this flask of mine and push it. So force became action. And non-violence was disappeared, interconnectedness disappeared. And I found that very inadequate. I was doing particle physics. I went deeper and deeper and deeper into quantum theory. And my thesis on hidden variables and non-locality was basically on two issues. Hidden variables was the search of some people to say, it's just that we don't know which particle lies below, then we will get prediction. And everything showed that you will never have predictability. You have to live with uncertainty. So uncertainty is a foundational principle of quantum theory. The second, brilliance. And this is where each of you can create a new future for yourself. There's nothing fixed about who we are. We are not isolated individuals floating in a vacuum. Atomism is the wrong construct of the world as well as the human being. We are interbeings. We are shaped by the breath that the trees give us, the water that the forests give us, the food that the soil gives us. And now all the research is coming out. I've got about 3 books on this subject, that our health and the health of the soil is one health. We have a book called Annam. In fact, I think from 24th onwards, we're going to be offering a short course. And I think this course will be on Zoom. You can go to the navdanya.org website and go to the courses of the Earth University. In October, we actually ran a long course on how to live on this earth. Because I have started to work on agriculture, not because I was bored with physics, but because the problems were becoming intense. In quantum theory, like I said, uncertainty is irreducible. Determinism, predictability is an illusion of the colonizers. Second, this uncertainty is linked to potential, the absence of fixedness, the absence of thingness in the world. The same entity called the quanta can be a wave and a particle. And each of you can be many things. Behind me is a wonderful image of our divinity of food. Not only is she diverse in terms of holding in her hands different crops that have originated on this land, you know, the sugarcane, the banana, the rice. India is the home of indica varieties of rice, 200,000 rice varieties. Third principle of quantum theory, very vital. Non-locality, non-separation. Because everything is connected, what I do here makes an immediate impact of something that's connected far away. So you might be living in a small place in northern Borneo, but your actions are interconnected to the rest of the world. Now, we have been made to believe through power, and we've been made to believe through fixedness and the Cartesian idea of separation, and the world is a machine, the Baconian idea that we have to master nature. And all this has led to an illusion that power comes from the top down. Both my learning, my scientific inquiry, my activism over these 50 years tells me that power comes from the soil upwards, and power is in every being. So, you know, the world is creative through a power that's a non-violent power. And the mechanical thinking, the industrial thinking made us blind to it, made us blind to the fact that a little seed can grow into a giant rainforest tree, that a little rice can give you 1,000 rice seeds. So I am realizing increasingly, and this year's course on the return to Earth from 1st to 12th of October will be not just on the living seed and the living soil and the living food, but on the living circular economies. But I realize that circularity is not limited. The beauty of life in self-organization is, you know, I have actually been gifted this beautiful ring by the indigenous people of the Andes. This ring is the symbol of Pachamama. the organizing principle of life on earth. Now you can see it's an outward growing spiral. It's a circular economy, but not a constrained economy. It's constantly expanding. So I have one little rice seed and I plant it, and it gives me 1,000 seeds. Some will go to the birds, and some will go for future seed, and some of it will feed us. That is how the universe is maintained, through the abundance of the circularity of giving back. Let me come back to why I went into agriculture. So here, here I am. Of course, I was doing forest issues. I was working as a volunteer for CHIPCO. I was doing a lot of research on science and technology issues. But in 1984, two disasters took place. One in the place where I had done my PhD and done my master's in particle physics in Punjab. Now, Punjab is the land where the Green Revolution was first introduced. The word Green Revolution makes it sound, it's green and it's revolutionary, and we all love green and we all love revolution. But it was not green, it was bloody. And it was not revolutionary because it was imposed by the Rockefeller Foundation, the US government, the US military, to use leftover war chemicals, which became fertilizers, in order to redefine agriculture. And this was done in India in 1966. But by the 1970s, the soils were dying, the waters were disappearing, people were getting diseased, farmers were getting indebted, and the farmers rose in revolt in 1984. The violence became very intense. The military was sent to Punjab. The story was rewritten, not as a problem with the agricultural model, but as conflict between religions, which is the way the story always gets told. Stories that are not about conflicts between people are made to look like conflicts between people as the new divide and rule of the global empire. That same year, on 2nd of December 1984, a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide leaked. And it killed, according to local people, 700,000 people. No, it's not 7,000 people that night. But I go back, 84 to now is 38, 37 years, 36 years. No, 38 years. From 38 to now, can you imagine how many generations have been born? And they're being born, maimed, and crippled. I go there when I can for the anniversary of what the people of Bhopal call a genocide. So I was working those days for the United Nations University, and I said there's something going on and it must be understood. So I wrote a book called The Green Revolution, and a little story, because it's linked to Malaysia. So The Violence of the Green Revolution was the name of the book. And at customs, they confiscated my books because they thought the violence of the Green Revolution was about religion, not about an agricultural model. And it took Mr. Idris, to get the customs to release that book, which I had wanted Mr. Idris to release. That's when I started working on agriculture. And because I'd worked on agriculture, I started to get called to meetings, including one in 1987 in Geneva, where the chemical companies that had come out of Hitler's wars were talking now of owning the seed, because now the new technique of moving genes through recombinant DNA had been discovered. And they said, with this technology, we can make GMOs, and through GMOs, we can own the seed, we can patent the seed, and no farmer will have their own seed. By the year 2000, all seeds will belong to us. They said 5 companies, now they're 4. And no farmer will have their own seed. And I'd worked long enough in agriculture to realize how the seed works. And in this dialogue, I said, but you don't invent the seed. And they actually said so clearly, how we define law is the way the law works. And so they created this category called intellectual property. And my government said, but you cannot bring intellectual property to international trade. You cannot make it part of the GATT and the WTO, because this is about national parliaments deciding their law. So the US negotiators went back to America and put TR before IP. Intellectual property was national, but they said trade-related intellectual property by definition is international. And we were right. Who wrote the laws? Monsanto. I started to save seeds, and we created community seed banks. But I started to work with my government. I started to work with our parliament. This was pre-globalization. This was pre-global corporations owning and controlling every government. And I worked with our parliament, and we managed to put in our law, Article 3J, which says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. They cannot be patented. And this has been my life's work, but it's also been part of court cases with Monsanto, where they can't say the seed is inert. It's what we do to it. It makes it a Superman. I have a book called Origins in India, Reclaiming the Commons from America. That is the history of these 37 years of work on biodiversity and the seed. As I said, Navanya has created seed banks, community seed bank. I said, seed is not intellectual property of Monsanto. It belongs to the earth. It belongs to the farmers. It belongs to everyone. So we created community seed banks. We have 150 community seed banks. And if you really want to learn, come for the October course on how you work with seed, what the seed is and how you work with seed. We grow 2,000 crop varieties on our farm. And what I've learned in all of these years is you have to do the right thing. You have to do your little bit. But we are part of an amazing, powerful earth. She does the rest. We merely have to be in service of the earth. We are not her masters. We are not her owners. We are not her controllers. We are a web. We are a strand in the web of life. And we have to play the right role. Now, we've been distracted from this, first by the assumption that nature is dead, just inert raw material to be mined and exploited. And all my now, I've done this work for, as I said, for 50 years. And I realized industrialism is a way of rupturing the cycle. In nature and ecological economies, as the amazing tribals in the forests of Borneo, there's always a law of return. You constantly give back and give back and give back, and you don't extract. But that means extraction is unethical and extraction is inefficient. So to break the living earth recognition, which is actually what the recognition of deep ecology is, basically, they created the idea the earth is dead matter. The earth is inert, and value comes by its exploitation as raw material. But if you look wherever there's an industry, they exploit and they create a mine and they leave ruins where the mining was done. And then the processing itself is a polluting problem. Turn to anything, turn to plastic, turn to pesticides, turn to oil. That is the pollution problem of the planet. Biodiversity economies create no pollution. In fact, they remove pollution. So the first false assumption we have to get rid of is that absence of industrialism is backwardness. In my view, absence of industrialism is a sign of living in harmony with the earth. And industrialism, as far as I'm concerned, is a war against the earth. The fuel is coal and oil. And for anyone who worries about climate change, we need to go to the roots. Climate change is a result and consequence and a symptom. The real problem is extractivism. The real problem is fossil fuel dependence and forgetting the power of the living earth in order to make fossil fuels inevitable. Even the idea of energy, I've done physics and I know energy is not merely fossil energy. There's so many energies. What in our language, energy, self-creative energy, the ability to act is called Shakti. And we work with hundreds of thousands of women farmers, and we call them Shaktis because they work with their bodies, with their minds. with no external inputs, and they produce amazing diversity. So Shakti is power in creative form with its own ability to renew. Fossil energy is an external input with only the ability to pollute and degrade and destroy this planet. And industrial agriculture, chemical farming is a fossil fuel farming because every chemical input is made of fossil fuels. Every transport is made with fossil fuels. The palm oil economy is not just a palm oil economy, its processing is fossil fuels. Its shipment across the world is fossil fuels. I'll just say three things on this. Names, we name things. We name things because it's easier for communication. But nothing is just one thing. That is the quantum philosophy. A particle is also a wave. So to name it as merely a particle and forget that its potential to be a wave is to forget its potential and its ability to connect. A wave connects. A particle is localized. And to be both together, to be rooted in place and interconnected is the amazing miracle of the world as it is organized. It's not organized like a machine. So deep ecology is one name given by one group of people. Ecofeminism is another name, but both of them turn their backs to the industrial paradigm, to the capitalist extractivist paradigm, and to the mechanistic epistemological paradigm. Industrialism, or let me just say this in another way. We are part of the earth. And I think what you are doing are trying to be part of the earth and to know it in your daily consciousness. I can see in the hall you're sitting, you've got bamboo, you're not surrounded by cement walls. You are trying to be the earth. As part of the earth and being one of the earth, we can never be separate. But colonialism, industrialism, fossil fuel driven industry, all needed separation. Without separation, they have no place. Cynthia very nicely said you had a nap because it's part of how do we make ourselves useless to capitalism. And there are hundreds of thousands of ways to make yourselves useless to capitalism. Just not believing in the illusions and of capitalism, which is what makes the prisons of capitalism. So since we are connected, it is an illusion to say we are separate. I have called this illusion of separation ecological apartheid, but it goes hand in hand with an epistemological apartheid. The idea that knowledge of conquest is deeper knowledge than knowledge of being and belonging. New epistemologies are telling us the knowledge of being and belonging, which is about dialogue, interaction. I know, or every farmer I know, every indigenous person I know talks about talking to trees, talking to plants. Because for us, these are sentient beings. Our most brilliant scientist, J.C. Bose, who was the founder of electromagnetism, he also decided to use electromagnetic waves to see the life of plants. As long as he did electromagnetism, he was honored, taken to England, and then he started to use that equipment to say plants are living and sentient and intelligent, and they started to turn him into an outcast. Because you cannot have an colonizing industrial worldview without saying plants are dead, women are unintelligent, workers have no knowledge, the soil is empty, the seeds are empty, the land is empty. And in many of my books, I've talked about this shift from terra madre, the mother earth, to terra nullius, the dead, inert, empty earth. So deep ecology really says, in shallow environmentalism is not enough. We have to understand our relationship. And the word was named by a wonderful person called Arne Naes. And, for 5 years, I had a chair at the University of Oslo. And I told them, well, I can't stay here 5 years. I will come here and I will do as much teaching as you need, but always in a 2-week, 3-week program. So I can go back and do my work at home. But Arne Naes was also a professor at Oslo University, lovely, cheerful man. I think he died in his 90s. He's the one who named it deep ecology, this we are one with the earth. Ecofeminism as a word was given by a French feminist. And it basically means, in my view, the subjugation of the earth and subjugation of women is the same subjugation of capitalist patriarchy. The merger of capital as power and patriarchy as power becoming one. The liberation of women and the liberation of the earth are the same liberation. And that means a shift from using tools of violence to conquer the earth and control women to celebrating systems of nonviolence to allow and enhance the freedom of all beings, the freedom of the last human being, and through it, shift from scarcity to abundance, from competition to cooperation, from monocultures to diversity. And I can tell you, it is such a joyful way to live rather than constantly chase the next dollar in a financial company, which will give you in India 2, 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs, 10 lakhs, or an IT company. You know, who owns money to who controls the world's economy? The 1%. I have a book called Oneness versus 1%, which I wrote when I saw Bill Gates running the world. And I've written it with my son, who had so much knowledge about how the financial system is working and how the acquisitions are working. The world's economy now is controlled by the 10 billionaires, who are by and large the tech billionaires. And that's why they want everything digitalized, because for them, this is the new enclosures. But it is also the new surveillance system. So when you say, how do we make ourselves useless to capitalism? You're in a forest. You made yourself useless. You know, you made yourself useful to the earth, useful to community. So the two don't go hand in hand. When you make yourself useful to capitalism, you turn yourself into raw material. You are the new mine, and you are the new dump yard. The surveillance capitalism that is being created by the digital economy and the tech barons is basically, you know, just like their mines for aluminium and bauxite and their mines for coal, in the new data regime, we are the mine for data. So they mine, you know, Facebook gives you free use of Facebook, but then Facebook sells your data 600 times a day so that a company can sell you something that, you know, if you talk to your friend, or if I talk to my friend, I'm wearing red today, before I know it, all over my computer will be red clothing. And you try it out and it shows, you know, it's constantly 24/7 surveillance. But that's not all. It is used by political parties now. And political parties have only one capital: divide and rule and hate. Communities spread love. Power spreads hate, fear, division. So the surveillance capitalism is turning us into mines and then into dump yards, where through behavior modification, we are being asked to change our thinking. And when I'm saying this, I'm not saying it trivially. I've analyzed all the patterns in these 2 years of COVID. I have a little book called The Future of Food, Health, and the Earth. And I've just analyzed 3 patterns. And I've done it with an indigenous practitioner of Ayurveda in India. I said, you tell us about how we see this issue in Ayurveda, and I will read and analyze the pattern. They're actually patterns of human beings as users. And you know, we are appendages to machines. And the algorithm that runs the machine will decide our worth. And as our worth, we will be allocated a certain value. So they're already working on a system where they're hoping 99% humanity will be useless. And the 1% will, you know, most of the 99% of the 1% will be slaves to perform the extractivist role. And in my worldview, and I've called it Earth Democracy. I have a book called Earth Democracy, which I wrote after 99 in Seattle. In my view, we are part of the Earth's life. And as a part of the Earth's life, we are an Earth family. And as an Earth family, we have to respect the rights of all beings that are related to us. Of course, most people don't hear the tree, don't hear the river, don't hear the mountain, don't hear the birds. People do, indigenous people do. But even if you don't, knowing that they are part of your family and web of life, you have an obligation to respect them, to protect them. And that's why many of us got together, and Ema Morales hosted this. We drafted a declaration on the rights of Mother Earth. It's available in my book, Reclaiming the Commons, which is available as Origins from India. And I'm going to put in the chat box the course for October and the website of navdanya.org, so you all can follow up there. And maybe now we can stop to have some questions.
Hey, my name's Elan. I'm an artist. I love the idea that anything, any particle, anything, has multiple potentials of natures and states of being or different forms of energy, and to be a kind of energy is not limited to that, and the potential or the twist of shifting to another form of energy for another occasion perhaps, or another need, to me is a very powerful thought, to be able to kind of shape shift your basic way, to recognize that there's multiple natures to a particle, and that's so powerful, to a being, to a particle, to everything. Yeah.
So being is one, not being static. Being is evolution. Yeah. All beings are in evolution. No being is atomistic and separate. All beings are interbeings. Yeah. There's no way you can draw a line here and say, this is you, you are part of the forest. You can pretend you are not, but that breath you're taking is already, the forest is shaping you. The soil is shaping your gut. And the real issue is this one-dimensional, I call it the monoculture and the mechanistic mind, the monoculture of the mind and the mechanistic mind. First of all, reduced us to separateness and inertness, and then said, and you can only be this, behave yourself. To me, that one-dimensionality is slavery. And it is the way, how do they do it? They said, women don't work. Well, women are working away, but just because they weren't working for a salary for someone else, they didn't work. Yeah. So work was separated from the being because our bodies work. Work is what the exercise, this dispensation of energy. Work is energy. And it's autopoietic energy of our body. When I lift my hand, I don't need fossil fuels to lift my hand. My system is able to move it from within the energy of the body. So, how do we make ourselves useless to capitalism? Diversity, plurality, multidimensionality.
I was curious about, with all that you have seen now, what do you see is still new for you? What's new? What's the next chapter for you in your work or in your life? Thank you.
Well, because the world keeps changing, and I said nothing is static, I can see the three things that will be new and are new is one, I've dedicated my life to love and service for the earth. And I've seen just in the last year, every one of our languages, every word I speak is co-opted and made to mean the opposite. And I'll give you just two examples. So I wrote a book called Soil Not Oil to say that climate discussion was missing the soil and missing life. And that's where I showed that 50% gases come from an industrial system of producing food. And we can solve the problem by turning to life in the soil, life of biodiversity, photosynthesis. And I've done it all at the scientific level. And we continue to do it on our farm. We just yesterday, the heat was so intense. I just told my colleagues, I said, let's just measure in the soil, the temperature and the moisture, because these are the two things that decide whether life will live or not. And under the trees, of course, the the moisture was 25%, the temperature was 20 degrees less than the fields where urea had been sprayed. Yeah. So we are killing the capacity of this earth with chemicals and chemical farming. And I've always said, money is not the currency of life. Life is the currency of life. What flows is nutrition, food, water, breath. Those are the true currencies. Money is not a currency of life. It's a currency of the market. But as a currency of the market, it's a mismeasure of true economies that generate life for people, for other beings. Well, this year, they've just decided Wall Street is going to own nature. And they're using the vocabulary they're using is the vocabulary we use. So people who don't have a deep ecology perspective and have a superficial environmentalist perspective will fall for it. And they're falling for it. And Wall Street, that has caused collapse again and again and again, including 2008, they're saying, Rockefeller and Wall Street, that we'll make 4,000 trillion owning nature and speculating on nature in Wall Street. I have a piece, if you want to go further in it, I wrote it for Earth Day, and it's on the website of Navdanya International, and I've called it Mother Earth is Not for Sale. And it goes from our slogan at Seattle in WTO, when we told WTO that, our water's not for sale, our food's not for sale, and we had said the world is not for sale. Now I'm saying the earth is not for sale, and those who have commodified everything would lie. So again, here's a place where in your communities, with whoever you're part of, reclaim the commons of life and cultivate the commons of life. The second co-option that I see, and I'll have to spend a lot of time on it, I've done so much work on soil, and now they're preparing the ground, everything's soil, soil, soil. Suddenly soil is all in everyone's head. But they're preparing the ground for reducing the soil to a dump yard for pollution. We see the soil as life. Mr. Gates, and I have his book here, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. He says, net zero doesn't mean we won't pollute. Net zero means we'll keep polluting, but we'll find land where our carbon pollution can be offset. So they're trying to create a carbon trade. And I've called it carbon colonization. I have another piece which I've written called Plants, Planet, and People before COP26. So when you ask me, what will the future, what will my future work be? My work for the last 50 years has been, every lie that's told, strip it naked. Just show what really it is. That the emperor has no clothes. I have the little child, in that, remember that story where the naked emperor was strutting around, and everyone was cheering, oh, what beautiful clothes. And it was a little boy who said, the emperor has no clothes. So I've been the little child who's always said, but this emperor has no clothes. The GMO emperor has no clothes. Carbon colonization has no clothes. The other thing I see is, of course, continuing to do the work I've done, saving seeds, working with farmers to create self-reliant circular systems so that they can survive. They survived COVID. It was what an experience. My sisters would call me from the field and say, no one in our village got COVID. And because the global supply chains collapsed, and where people were depending on long distance trade, there was no food. People were starving. And we create gardens of hope. And we say, everyone should have a little garden. If you don't have land, take a little piece of land from someone else and work together. And they said, we had food throughout, and not just that, we grew medicinal plants that we had forgotten. We realized that health and medicine comes from the biodiversity of the earth, not from the pharmaceutical industry, which is the same as the agrochemical industry, which has destroyed the planet and our health. So there's so much to do because, the desperation, if you look at the literature, everyone says, in 10 years' time, this will happen. In 10 years, by 2030, this will happen. Earth works on very long cycles. In 10 years' time, we have to, of course, watch and be witness. But we also have to sow the seeds of another future. And as I said earlier, it's not, we don't have to solve the climate problem. We have to stop messing up with the climate. And that means stop dependence on fossil fuels, stop dependence on chemicals, and start serving the soil. And then the rest of the work, the soil organisms, the trees, the plants will do. So it's an exciting moment that we are on the verge of collapse. We are standing at the verge of extinction, but it's small actions that can avert extinction. And to me, that is the challenge now. The rest of my life should be an amazing experiment in saying no to extinction.
I grew up as a like farming, rice farming, and we still do here. But these are all the things that we're trying to do to revive, And one of the things that always become the barriers or to go back to nature in a way, or to be with the old ways. Not really old, but I think it's what do you call what you can get from the surroundings. Yeah, is that people will say you are left behind, you are backwards, very funny, weird. So these are the things that we get. If you don't have a cell phone, I remember my friend in Japan. She's the only one actually who don't really use cell phone, but she is in a lot of trouble that time when I met her. But now here in our area also, people move very fast. Everybody will have to go into online everything, and they really say that you are in the trend. Whereas if you grow your own food, and if you practice something that is a resistance to the industrial world, then you are old. Yeah, you are backward. So these are the things that is always been spoken to all us, especially for me, also indigenous, that I still try to have words so that I can be, talk to others, or, well, probably just let them be, so that I just continue and have this kind of circle of people who gives energy and who gives life.
Yeah. On the questions about being backward, we were told it's backward to work in harmony with nature. But what is ecology and what is deep ecology but harmony with nature? And the United Nations adopted the idea that there has to be harmony with nature. I have watched, over my long life, how the colonizers bring a new tool, like a new civilizing mission, yeah? Oh, that you don't have that, so you're backward. And then they push you into believing that you are backward. So you adopt their tool, which is a tool of colonization. Let me give you 3 examples. So they came with this for chemical fertilizers, yeah? And people gave up ecological regenerative agriculture. But now around the world, ecological regenerative agriculture is making a big comeback, yeah? And nobody says to the young person who does farming, oh, you're backward. But an indigenous person is called backward. A person making a choice to do regenerative farming is not called backward, but it's the same. So we offer a course called the Yoga of the Earth, because everyone wants to do yoga now. And we tell them, but yoga with farming is yoga of the earth. And it's taught by a yoga teacher who makes the connections between food and the soil and earth. But I have called this tool making, here is a superior tool and you must adopt it, otherwise you're backward. I have called it chronocolonization, because all living beings evolve. They evolve from within. A tree grows from a little seed into a tree. A rice paddy grows from one seed of rice to many seeds of rice. A culture evolves. Yeah. But chronocolonization is someone saying you are backward, So you must use my tools and become my slave. They'll never say become my slave. That's something you have to discover. So digitalization, in my book, Oneness vs. 1%, I have written a chapter on the digital prison that's being created. And I didn't know anything about what was to come, but they had banned cash in India with 4 hours notice. And a Paytm was forced on India just today. Yeah. And they said, oh, Indian. But Alibaba was in it and all the foreign investors were in it. Today, they've just withdrawn. And Paytm is collapsing. So they made us believe that money is untouchable. Cash transactions are untouchable. Only digital payment. They made the children believe, oh my God, don't go to school. 50% of India's children dropped out with online learning because they didn't have phones. So it's an inequality, creator. But we earlier talked about the multidimensionality that we are, the wave and the particle we are. And the problem with the digital world is it's very linear. It's a movement of data. Data is not knowledge. Knowledge is not wisdom. Data does not allow you to decide this is the right thing to do and that's the wrong thing to do. That comes from knowledge and wisdom. And so it's a huge reductionism that's taking place of our knowing. And that's why groups like yours who get together and seek and, constantly seek to live in the present moment with your choices of responsibility and intelligence. That is the way to go.
In the villages around you, are you involved with education at school level? Young people, children involved in your programming? Can you talk a bit about education?
Yeah, we work with children in schools, and we have a program, we call it the Young Ecologist. Yeah, children as ecologists. And I started these Gardens of Hope with the widows. We've lost 400,000 farmers to suicide because of the globalized Monsanto model agriculture. 400,000. And then in the schools, children are feeling so alienated. I read a news item of a child dying with suicide. And I said, we must start Gardens of Hope in schools. So we have Gardens of Hope in schools. And every time there's something very urgent, we work in ways that children can be involved. So this year, we are working on helping remember how important trees are. Because with the intense heat, if the poor people didn't have the shade of a tree, they would be dying of heat stroke. One tree provides the cooling effect of 6 air conditioners. And we've forgotten all of these benefits. We've forgotten the wonderful jackfruits and all the amazing trees that are available in the tropical world. Because the temperate world is biodiversity poor, it imposed poor decisions on us and we forgot our rich biodiversity. So this year we are getting children involved in document your trees, know your trees, protect your trees. And we have a wonderful festival called Raksha Bandhan, where brothers and, where sisters tie these protective threads on brothers. And we've started tying these protective threads to all the trees around us. Maybe you can do that as a ceremony of the autonomy of the trees, that these trees are not the carbon sinks of a corrupt global carbon trade colonization system. Each tree is a person, each tree. So there's so much, for artists, to work with children, there's so much to do, so much to do.
How has it been for you to be, seen as, presented as, known as, or projected on as someone fierce and, maybe even bossy or know-all, or, all those things. And particularly for the young women here, many of them who are, indigenous, but they've gone on to become scientists, and are trying to find their pathway into the future. what advice have you got for them, for us?
So I retain my strength. And as you know, we used to sing a morning prayer in school, which said, the steel is strong because it knows the hammer and white heat. And I've dealt with hell of a lot of hammering and white heat in my lifetime. And they have been my teachers. Every time they have, and I've been attacked enough, the Monsantos and the trolls, they have, they're permanently active. And I know them by name, so I know what they'll say. For them to say know-all, that I'm a know-all, no, they don't say I'm a know-all. They say I'm stupid, I haven't done science, I don't know anything. I feel every day of my life, there's so little I know and so much to learn. For me, life is a journey of learning. And, we are a very small organization, Navdanya, but we have set the terms. Only because we worked authentically, we worked with our conscience, we worked in community. Now, I could not work with colleagues in a small team. I could not reach 1 million farmers if it was a bossy Miss Know-all. I have to give all the respect to every plant, every earthworm. I have to give every respect to the peasants who have been my teacher and my colleagues who are very often half my age. But they have talents, and they have, they have insights that I don't have because I come from a particular age and a particular style and a particular background. So community is vital, and learning as a permanent, ongoing being and journey is vital. So like I said, the fossil age and the industrial age made us think only in terms of external inputs. The ecological systems of indigenous cultures and ecological systems of a possible future have to be about internal systems, systems that grow from within. And the same goes for, dealing with yourself. You cannot create your idea of who you are through an external input of someone else. You must live your being. You must let your conscience guide you, and you must let the relationships in your community be the true measure of who you are and who you are becoming.
Just so you know, there's a soft rain around us. It's very cool. We have a sacred mountain in view, but it's shrouded in mist and cloud right now. And this has been our vibe while listening to you.
Well, I love to the forest and the trees and the mountains and to all of you.
I think we're gonna give you some love. Let's stand up, everyone. Maybe come close if you can come into a little bit of a circle. Can we? Come, so she can see us. Maybe one of us in front will come down. Come. Okay. This is us.
Wonderful. All love, all strength, all inner strength to all of you.
And we're sending you the same for your onward journey. And maybe we'll be able to welcome you here on the soil of the island of Borneo.
Whenever, as they say, inshallah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.